Welcome to this Wood Solutions Campus presentation on Forest and Chain of Custody certification. This presentation covers the background and general structure of forest certification internationally. Other presentations go into more detail about how forest and chain of custody certification work on the ground. Timber and wood products are recognised as renewable materials that contribute to sustainable development. However, they are not renewable if the rate of harvest is higher than the rate of regrowth. This leads to deforestation. Also, forests are valuable ecosystems, and these ecosystems can be vulnerable to degradation from poor forestry practice. Unsustainable forestry practice can have significant impacts on the forest biodiversity, its soil and water quality, and on the communities that rely on the forest. So most environmental concerns about wood products focus on the quality of forestry practice, particularly the impact of this practice on vulnerable forest ecosystems.
So it's critical when we're using timber from trees or wood products that forestry needs to be sustainable. That is correct forest management of the trees, of the resources, the biodiversity, the socio-economic values, all those values we associate with trees and forests, that those are maintained at a high level and a sustainable level into the future.
Unsustainable forestry practices are a real concern, especially as timber and wood products are internationally traded commodities. It is very difficult for a specifier or customer who has an application like these chairs in one country to know that their purchase of timber from this forestry operation on the other side of the world is not contributing to illegal logging or unsustainable practices in that country. In reality, these people want to know that the forestry practices followed on the site are satisfactory, and that the timber from the harvest site is actually the timber delivered through the supply chain for the project. One solution is certification of each of these stages. The forestry practices on the harvest site can be certified to some standard, and the chain of custody of the products from that harvest site can be certified along the supply chain. Both types of certification can then be bundled into a coordinated certification scheme.
Look, certification schemes can trace their origin back to the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio through the United Nations, where probably the basic rules or requirements for sustainable forest practices were established. Deforestation has been a global issue probably really for the last century, and certification becomes a mechanism to ensure that obviously deforestation is not taking place, but more importantly forests are well managed and they are sustainable. Timber is well, when you look internationally, and there's probably certain areas and certain products that really are high risk as far as unsustainable practices and even illegal practices. Certification ensures that that particular product, it gives the consumers confidence that the particular product which they're purchasing comes from a sustainable source, and most importantly it is independently verified. So it's not just a manufacturer patting themselves on the back saying, yeah, my product's fantastic, but there's independent validation by qualified bodies who audit the process to ensure that each stage of production and through the chain of custody, through the supply chain, ensures that claims are actually verifiable and claims of sustainability can be justified.
Forest certification is a forest management process with three key components. First, a company needs forest management procedures to harvest the log. These cover what they do and their legal requirements for harvesting. To achieve forest certification, the company's forest management procedures have to comply with a recognised external forest management standard. That external standard is our second key component. The third key component is third-party audit of the company's procedures and actions against the external standard by an independent certification body. When all these three are in place and compliance is signed off, the company can claim its practices are certified. Chain of custody certification is a production and materials management process with three similar components. The company has to have procedures for handling the wood for certified forests. These procedures have to comply with the requirements of an external standard, and there has to be third-party auditing of the procedures and actions against this standard. Third-party certification is important.
Certification is independent validation. It means that there's somebody external to the company which comes into that organisation that checks to ensure that that particular organisation is following the rules, that their forests are well managed, that high conservation and high biodiversity areas are protected. Watercourses includes also social aspects, ensuring that people in regional areas get access to employment.
Yep.
Make sure that employees are treated with respect and in the appropriate ways. And most importantly, to ensure that the forests are sustainable. So the wood that we harvest in 2016, in 2050 it'll still be available.
Forest and chain of custody certification normally operates as part of a certification scheme. Forest certification schemes exist in most major wood producing countries, and two major schemes exist internationally. One is the Program for Endorsement of Forest Certification, or PEFC scheme. This is a program for the mutual recognition of national forest certification schemes. For example, Australian Forest Standard certification under Australian standards AS 4707 and AS 4708 have PEFC recognition, and timber certified to these standards can display the PEFC or the AFS logos. This means this certification is recognised in other countries. The other major scheme is Forest Stewardship Council, or FSC certification. FSC sponsors national schemes and endorses them internationally. Globally, only 9% of forests are certified under one scheme or another, and these forests account for about 35% of global wood production and trade. In Australia, over 95% of production forests now have forest certification to either the Australian Forestry Standard or to FSC or to both. While forest and chain of custody certification offer certainty of forestry practice, they require a lot of work for forestry and timber companies to achieve and to maintain. In the end, forest and chain of custody certification are market-based systems. They are voluntary for the forest grower and the timber producer, and for the building designer, developer or owner. There are no national regulations requiring forestry or chain of custody certification. However, green building guidelines or building accreditation schemes may recommend it. There are also limits to forest and chain of custody certification. Certification can tell us that forest products originate from legally harvested and sustainably managed forest, that forest management is structured and satisfies the requirement of publicly available standards, and that the product can be tracked back to certified forests. However, certification can't tell us about the quality of the wood and its fitness for any purpose, or about the credentials of the supply chain after the timber has left the forest. In summary, most environmental concerns about wood products focus on the quality of forestry practice. Forest certification can assure customers that forests are managed to an agreed and acceptable standard. Chain of custody certification can assure customers that the timber supplied comes from these acceptably managed forests. Two major certification schemes exist internationally, PEFC and FSC certification. Forest and chain of custody certification is voluntary for the forest grower, the timber producer, the building designer and the owner. And guidelines or building accreditation schemes may recommend or require certification to receive points.